select vehicles from a list of predetermined, pre-priced options. The procurement method process meets the requirements of the Canadian Free Trade Agreement and U.S. Partnership Trade Agreement for fair, open, and transparent procurement of goods and services. The benefits include the ability to select exact vehicles and options, can opt in or out at any time, less concerns about secondhand depreciation, factory vehicles only, reduced procuring timeline by research on vehicle statistics, and rating is completed and reviewed annually. Compliant bids are received on an annual basis through the ITQ process. Initial procurement pre-qualifying steps are essentially completed. No cross-border complications, as procurement is done in partnership with BC and Saskatchewan. Still able to obtain quotes, the city can leverage the contract and begin placing orders upon adoption. Simplified process, city fills out the specification sheet and the city's government purchasing rep handles the purchase. Communication with the government representative is great and no hidden fees. The government representative provides a copy of an invoice that shows all other costs as well example terms set up by the manufacturer and the municipality. Pre-delivery inspection is completed at the local dealer and warranty is provided through the local dealer. New vehicle information statement is sent directly to the city and there's no spending. To the Government Alberta Standing Offer Program, the City of Lloydminster will arrange through the manufacturer to acquire the vehicles and warranty work will be provided through the local dealership. The existing half-ton and three-quarter-ton trucks are or have exceeded their expected lifespan and need to be replaced to ensure a safe and reliable fleet of equipment is available. Option the city that the committee accept the report as presented, that the committee request more information. Monies have been allocated in the 2018 capital budget for the purchase of required fleet vehicles.
Thank you, Dave. Questions or comments? Councilor Forster.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I'm just curious, this is done through another government agency to do these purchases?
Yes, it's done through Alberta Purchasing.
Okay, so I know you say that there's no hidden fees, but are there any like upfront fees or like a fee for their service that we end up paying that's included in the cost of the vehicle, or not included in the cost of the vehicle, but it's even, you know, the other fees that may be included? There's nothing?
Not that we're aware of, no.
Okay.
So the price that we get on that paper is what we're billed.
Okay.
Councilor Baker.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Dave. Just two questions. One was the GST. That's on top of whatever the quoted price is?
That's correct.
That would make sense. The other question, it says under the benefits include, bullet number 6 is still able to obtain quotes.
Yes.
So you could
Yep.
use those, but you could still get quotes locally?
If we desire, yeah.
If we choose to do
yeah,
that.
yeah, exactly. If we choose to. If we don't feel comfortable with the pricing.
I think that's
and
important.
there's something going on, then we could still have the ability to obtain local quotes.
I think our local fellows would like to have a chance to bid too. Whether they win or not, that's business.
Yeah. The only thing though is by going through this, and then if we do go into the quote process, then we go back to the procurement and we go bids and tenders.
Yeah.
Because it's over a certain value.
But that's open, the door is open to do that. Thank you.
Councilor Buckingham.
Hey, Your Worship, thanks, Dave. I knew you were coming today, so I wanted to ask this question. It kind of fits right in with this. I got cornered the other day about the new snowplow trucks that we bought. I got asked the question, and it kind of falls into this, so I didn't know the answer. What happens to the existing fleet? So we're replacing things like that. Do we actually have a city program that we send these to auction, or what do we do as we replace vehicles? I didn't know the answer, so I thought I would ask today.
Yeah, there's, in this situation here, we still do need one single axle truck for our spray patch equipment, so we will be keeping one back. And the other two, depending on what we think the value is worth, they could be sold locally or they could go to a Ritchie Brothers auction also.
And then when we go through this process and we're replacing multiple vehicles, what happens in that instance?
Right now, what happens with these half-tons is we currently have summer usage vehicles right now that have been, we call them lifed out for quite a few years, so they're over their 10-year period. So what happens is the vehicles we're buying now, they will go allocated to maybe supervisors or other departments, Their vehicles would then go down to the summer usage vehicles, and the summer usage vehicles, seeing that they're older and not worth as much money, will probably go on the city public auction. Right.
Okay, good, thank you.
Yeah.
So in essence, Dave, we recycle until there's not much recycling left. Is that what
That's
it
where it goes.
Okay. And one question I had before I go around the table. Other vehicles such as SUVs, you've talked about half-ton trucks and three-quarter-ton trucks. The city has a wide array of vehicles trying to suit to the purpose. Will this also apply to other purchases going forward?
Yes, it does. They supplied us a list of, quite a large list actually, of cars, SUVs, vans, everything. It's just that this year here, this is all currently looking for.
Excellent. Any questions on this side of the table? Council Fagan.
I'm just wondering what the lifespan, average lifespan of the vehicle is, say for a pickup?
We average them at 10 years, but we also bring them in and we evaluate them at the same time to see if the mileage is up and the hours are up. We base them on hours. We do our services on hours. So if we do get a vehicle with 7,000 to 8,000 hours on it, it's reevaluated, and that kind of sets the classification of we put it into our summer usage.
Councilor Rivers.
Thank you, Your Worship. What does it mean when it's talking about less concerned about the second-hand depreciation?
That's just if we were in the situation of buying second-hand equipment.
Oh, if we bought used, I understand.
At one time we did. We try not to do that anymore.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? Dave, I guess the last one I might leave you with then is, do we have an idea, are we going to say potentially 5%, 10%? Have we done any comparisons just to see? And I know it's changed price unless you go year to year.
Oh yeah, for sure. We've done some rough estimates so far. We still have to finalize it. We bought some vehicles in 2014, 2015, and these here are very close to that price, or just a bit more. We're looking at $1,000, $1,500 to get the one right now. We still have some finalizing.
Okay.
And then there's still, when we get the vehicles, there is still the fact that we put all our safety equipment on, like our beacon lights, first aid kit, fire extinguisher, so that's an additional cost up on top of this too. That's not in the factory.
Okay. Councilor Dutcher.
Thank you, Worship. Just the other question. So are virtually all the brands available for pickup trucks?
Yes, the list currently has Toyotas, Nissan, Ford, Dodge, and GM.
Okay, so back to the point earlier about local quotes, basically every one of those local distributors will be represented ultimately through those corporate models.
Yeah, that's correct. And whichever one they go to goes to the local team in the city.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Dave?
Just a comment, thank you. If you're saying that those prices now from 3 years ago are fairly similar to what you're seeing to purchase now, I would venture to guess that that's actually a huge savings. Just based on shopping for a newer vehicle lately myself and finding out that the tariffs and the aluminum and all of this other stuff that are going forward have really outshot the price of those things. So through this program, we're able to keep those at a 2015 level. I would say the savings are substantial.
Yep. And it saves us a lot of time in the end too.
All right. No further questions. Thank you, Dave.
All right, thank you.
Moving on to the agenda to now 4.3, City Manager.
Thank you, Your Worship. To discuss 4.3, Regional Emergency Management Mutual Aid Agreement, I'll ask Ernie Paulson to come forward.
Your Worship, Council, thank you very much for giving me a couple of minutes to chat about something that is, I think, quite important. So,
Thank you.
you may remember about a year and a half ago, a little better than a year ago, I brought forward a concept to seek your approval to move forward with conversations with our regional partners about a large area regional mutual aid agreement. In the months that have followed, we've been very busily beavering along with that, and have sent that, have done a broad collaboration throughout all of Northeast Alberta and Northwest Saskatchewan to get the opinions, thoughts, and guidance of municipalities and major settlements throughout the region. We now have a completed draft mutual aid agreement for your consideration and thoughts. Some key things about the mutual aid agreement that I think are important to keep in mind. As with all mutual aid agreements, this is a best effort agreement, which means that if we have resources and we have the ability to release them, we can do that. Should the city be in a position where it can't, for whatever reason, it doesn't not contribute to a response, it is well within our authority to say, no, I'm sorry, we can't. It establishes really important authorities, and we've seen this very broadly throughout North America, but certainly through Alberta over the last decade, that major community emergencies very rapidly run through the local municipality's ability to resource it fully. And we very quickly need to reach out, not only to the folks that live right next door to us, but much further afield, as we saw Calgary and Red Deer and others responding into Fort McMurray and High Level and Slave Lake and other jurisdictions like that. What this agreement does is it gives a mechanism by which we understand now how we would ask for help from our friends, our neighbors, and some of those friends and neighbors that aren't quite so close. It retains control, and this is a really important feature, and was an agreement broadly through all of the jurisdictions. Our resources remain under our direction at all times. Although they will work within the command envelope of the receiving municipality, they will be the command direction. The actual management and looking after those resources always retains with a City of Lloydminster person or personnel. An important piece of this is it establishes and recognized and agreed upon cost recovery matrix based on the Alberta Road Builders Association and other council-approved cost recovery requirement. So this is really important to keep in mind. Whether or not council chooses to send the bill, it's important that we know what the bill is. Particularly if you're receiving entity, it's kind of good to know what the bottom line might look like as you're asking. This is a really important feature and was important to everybody. Clarifies administrative roles and the final piece is this is a modular agreement. When you look at the signature blocks in there, we don't anticipate that all of those signatures will be received in the first month or two. It would be nice, but I'm not. That would be overly optimistic. But it is modular in design. The point of it is that as people feel comfortable coming into the agreement, they'll be able to do so. We do think it was important, and they have all been included in the consultation and the collaboration, whether or not they chose to take advantage of that. They have been included in that because we do think it's important that everybody has their fingerprints on this. So when they do feel ready to come forward, they'll be able to do so. So the next steps of this project include proceeding with the ratification process. That I'll be leaning very heavily on my friend in the city clerk's office to help guide. It's expected that this, like I said, the full rollout of this will be a multi-year endeavor. The options that are before you is to, the committee recommend Regional Emergency Management Mutual Aid Agreement, go forward to council for decisions as proposed. Second option is the committee recommend changes to the Regional Emergency Management Mutual Aid Agreement, and then ultimately for it to go forward, or that the committee request more information. Thank you.
Thank you, Ernie. Questions, comments? Councilor Buckingham.
Thank you, Richard. Thanks, Ernie. I can appreciate how much effort has gone into this at this point. If you just look at the list of people that are possibly or potentially included that have the ability to sign on to this, that's no small feat to get all of those together. So thank you to your team for all your efforts on that. The question I have, and I read through it multiple times just to make sure that it still could have missed it. Current mutual aid agreements that the city has in place with others, this supersedes it, effective at the time that said municipality or jurisdiction signs it, or how do the current existing agreements fall into play here?
So thank you for that. It's important insight, and there is a clause in the agreement that speaks to this. Does not supersede or replace any existing mutual aid agreements. The one-on-one agreements that we have, that people have with their neighbors, should continue and into the future. We know how they work, we know how they operate, and those are generally agreements that are activated frequently. This is more intended to be an overarching agreement that encompasses the neighbors we don't work with quite so often. The ones that we don't know their first names and that we don't generally share resources with. So they really are kind of work synergistically with each other.
And that's the general discussion and hope that I have for your answer. Because I think when I read this, it kind of supersedes it not in control. But I don't think and I could be wrong, I don't think there was a plan there's never been a plan of this nature encompassing this many people for something that could become a major emergency. We have standing mutual aid agreements locally, but there's nothing that is this overarching. So I think it's a really important key step, both when they talk about regionalization and growth and sustainability and safety. So, but it doesn't affect the day-to-day. That's the discussion I wanted to have in a public setting with you about it, so thank you.
Councilor Torres?
Thank you, Your Worship. I actually have a handful of questions. First, I was just curious, so there's several different municipalities listed on there. Is this a multilateral agreement that would be between not just, the city of Lloydminster, who could potentially go and help the Island of Wood Buffalo, but also, the village of Kidscotty that could? Like, the agreement is between all the parties in there to help each other, not the city of Lloydminster and all of these parties, correct?
That is correct. It's a mutual aid agreement.
Okay, got it. I just wasn't sure if it was our agreement with all of them or everyone's agreement with everyone, but I think I've got it handled now. One of the other things I was curious on is just, and I don't know if this is normal practice or if this is a relatively new thing, just I think it's Schedule C for the request for assistance. I'm just curious on emergency situations, whether it would be common to expect these things to be sent through registered mail as the way to make your request for aid.
So that is just one aspect of the request. There would be, we will still have to work as we get signatories to that. There will actually have to be the operating procedures that are developed as to actually how we exercise the agreement. So that piece of work is yet to come.
Oh, so this requesting agreement is it for the actual emergency or for the agreement?
So this mutual aid, this is for the actual agreement.
Oh, okay,
That we
that
read
Schedule
there.
C is for the
Yes.
actual agreement.
Exactly.
I misunderstood that. I thought it was requesting in the case of an emergency, and I'm thinking, well, if it's an emergency, you wouldn't send it through registered mail.
I will make a note as we leave. I'll make sure that that's absolutely clear. That's a good observation.
And it seemed like there was a really, good job of really addressing a lot of the liability issues and everything. I see there's still some potential if it's, willful misconduct or negligence, which I would expect would be within there all the same. But my one question is, actually more of a comment, is that I think the parts around command and things like that of being kind of managed by your own municipality within the context of the emergency is a good thing. And this isn't, trying to throw shade at the other municipalities, but at the same time, I don't know what the standard of the training at every single municipality would be. So I think it's important and good that we have our own management on site or whatever to say what our own emergency responders should be doing. Just in case there's a difference of opinion or something like that based on training, I think it's a good thing to have in there. And last was, one of the things I noticed is we don't necessarily specify which particular types of emergency response we're talking about. Like, it's not just fire or anything like that. So the city, in a scenario where it has, I don't know, a couple of years down the road has different levels of service or different types. Maybe that's emergency rescue, something along those lines. Or like some of the stuff the rescue squad does, I have no idea, like 10 or 15 years down the road. You could still include those as part of this overall agreement, and you wouldn't necessarily have to change anything for that, correct?
That's correct, and then the approval process to release resources does not rest with me or the fire chief, or it actually rests with the city manager and likely a conversation with senior elected officials in the municipality. That would be the expectation of any of that it would comply with our resource sharing rules and processes internally. This just enables us, without having to go to a council meeting and seek approval to move resources out.
Perfect, thank you. I just have one more.
Okay.
It's just my last question was just around, so we're about to go through the process on the fire side of having a master plan completed, potentially, or we already was, either way. So there's going to be potentially some costs that that come from that, and then we're going to get an idea of what things cost to a greater degree, and maybe there's the charge for fire service that could be incorporated into that if you're going outside your municipality. Will we have the ability to adjust those types of things? Because I see in the schedule that it's on a cost basis, but would that have to be upfront and communicated to the other municipalities of what your cost basis is in case it's significantly higher than in other municipalities? Because you could run into a scenario where you have full-time firefighters versus volunteer firefighters, and there could be a significant cost differential from one municipality to the next. So is that something that within your agreement with another municipality you have to have up front?
So within the agreement, what it anticipates is one of two things, is where council hasn't approved a fee structure and cost recovery structure for the municipality, it's whatever the agreement stipulated, I can't remember off the top of my head. If council has actually said, all right, so cost recovery means that X number of dollars per hour for the truck inclusive or additional staffing, there is some work that will have to happen on the city side. But I mean, it's not just fire trucks, it could be a grader, it could be a backhoe, it could be we need to send out ammonia plant workers to backstop, there's any number of, it could be that a community needs IT support. There's a whole range of services that we'll have to take a look at in terms of what cost recovery means from a municipal perspective. And council directs that.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Baker.
Thank you, Worship. When I had an opportunity to read this, I thought it was a really good idea. I think we went to Fort McMurray, I don't even know if we had a deal. But when people are in trouble, you go and help them. And whether we recover 100% of our cost, one day it's your turn, one day it's our turn. And crossfires don't just affect one community, it could affect 3 communities. We have little communities that have no ability to really handle the big issues. And I think that, and certainly you'd be better qualified than I would to say, but I think the province, when there is those kind of disasters, step up to the table and help out so that the municipalities can recover some of their costs. From a provincial level, they can't have fire service and all these other services and available all over the place. They just can't. So at the end of the day, whatever the emergency is, the way this agreement reads, if you have the resources, you send them. If you don't have the resources, if they want a helicopter, we can't send it because we don't have a helicopter. So you do what you can do, and I think it's well crafted. Is it perfect? Tell me what's going to happen, and I'll tell you. But I just think it was, in view of the Slave Lake fire and the Slave Lake, yes, Slave Lake and Fort McMurray fire, just an example in recent time. I just think it's an excellent idea that we have something in vogue that says I can phone this guy or that guy and he'll be there to help me. I think that's a really, and it could be any one of us. So thank you very much. I thought it was really a great idea what you've done here.
Councilor Bill.
Thanks. The document looks excellent to me. My only question would be, in terms of all the different municipalities that are involved or potentially to be involved, once they sign off on the agreement, and then that's effective?
That's correct. And as each one signs the agreement, it just gets attached. There's a fancy name for it in there that I forget off the top of my head.
So our amount to just say, or anyone just say, decides they're not going to, but all of a sudden they're in a state of emergency. Oh, I want to join in on this. Can they sign in and it becomes immediately effective?
Yeah, we would encourage them rapidly to fax off something and we very quickly would, however quickly they can get appropriate approval process, which likely be very quickly.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Councilor Danchuk.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, so again, good idea, good concept, help your neighbor. I guess the question I have is the selection of the parameters in terms of municipalities and maybe settlements. I don't see communities that are closer to us, like First Nations, like Onion Lake and Frog Lake. What was the rationale behind that?
So the First Nations operate under a completely different legal structure and governance system. And it's one that I'm working very closely with with the federal government and provincial governments on both sides of the border to sort out. I don't want to mess it up going to a First Nation community with legislation that doesn't reflect the reality. So we want to make sure it's not likely that they can sign this agreement. It's likely that the legislative authorities don't work for them. We want to find out what does, and how we do that is with an agreement attached to, and then figure out what the mechanism looks like.
Thank you.
Councilman Rowe.
Within the scope of the area that you've chosen here, have you approached different municipalities that are perhaps in this area, but they haven't been receptive, and that's not why they're not on the list? Or when I do look at some, they're quite far away. I just would like to see a map, with them all mapped out, kind of, to see why didn't we pick this place, why didn't we choose this place? Or is it that their resources wouldn't be of benefit to us, but we could possibly be of benefit to them? So I'm just wondering how these communities were chosen, and why maybe some were not on the list versus...
So we grabbed the northeast corner of Alberta, and it follows AEMA's field officers region. We needed to zone that. Seemed to make sense. So it's all the municipalities in there. Second zone is the Wainwright zone, Wainwright, Flagstaff County, which is another AEMA field officer. And then we grabbed, I think most, if not all, of the municipalities kind of down to Manitou Lakes, over to North Battleford-ish, and north to Meadow Lake. Beyond Meadow Lake, you actually can't get here from there. It's a huge workaround to get around the rivers. And so that seemed to geographically make the most sense.
Just for example, like Neilburg. I see it's not on here, or am I missing it?
If there's a hamlet, if it's a hamlet, they're caught under the region as a rural municipality.
I see. Okay. Maybe that's why I was thinking there was some. Thank you.
I'm not saying we haven't missed any.
No, that's fine. Is it possible to add those afterwards?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, if you look directly around the community here, you've got Low Rock and Marshall and Lashburn and Green Street and Hillmont, which are all encompassed in the RMs that are listed on this, for example.
So I guess, Ernie, we certainly want to comment. Thank you very much for bringing this forward. I think the first note on your information is that the sending jurisdiction has the authority, and I think that's very important. It's not demanded, it's an offer on behalf of the respective jurisdiction. You know, when you look, and we've got such a wide variety of people, villages, towns, rural municipalities, cities, including ourselves, and then a special municipality, Wood Buffalo, Lac La Biche. We all have different resources, but I think that at the end of the day, as Councilor Baker alluded to, and Councilor Diachuk, neighbors helping neighbors, and no matter if you're big or small, I think that's huge. And the other 2 points that brings the agreement to my attention is that in 2.11 and 2.12, shall and may, and it's laid out for certain things that are shall and certain things that are may. And by a legalistic standpoint, we don't have to do everything. If it's may, if it's a shall, we're there, and vice versa. And I think that lays it out very well, that some are mandatory and some are permissive. And that's very important in a document like this, because it can become fluid. And I'm glad that we're here addressing it today when everything is nice and level and smooth, and not in a torrent, because it doesn't matter if you're in the capital of the country and being flooded with record levels of water, or you're in Fraser Lake, British Columbia, fighting another wildfire. I think that, and it could be a tornado, it could be any other disaster that we face. So I appreciate being proactive rather than reactive, and letting our neighbors know that we're part of the team, and they're welcome to join the team as you've done. And I think they feel the same way, I hope, from that perspective. So hats off to the team. It's good work, and we'll look forward to seeing you come back to council for some direction. Any other questions, comments? Councilor Torres?
Just a quick comment. I didn't mean to sound as though it's not a solid document and a great idea. I really think that clearly a tremendous amount of work was put into this, and it sounds like you reached out to a whole lot of stakeholders to be able to even get it to this point, and it looks really solid and like a great idea, and something as a city we can potentially hang our hat on in the future. So thank you.
Any other comments?
Thanks, sir.
Ernie, if I could ask this, is there anyone else that's tackled this that's a pretty big piece of ground?
We're emulating a little bit of work that's been done in the northwest part of the province. They share some similar challenges in geography. That's huge areas, not a lot of large communities, and the need to provide top flight services because they have significant risks, as do we. So we're kind of emulating the north.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Moving on to the agenda, 4.4, City Manager.
Thank you, Worship. To present 4.4, Airport Runway Rehabilitation Project. I'll ask Wade Fraz from our Operations Department to come forward.
Hello, Worship and council members.
Afternoon, Wade.
I'm brought here to bring you guys an update on the runway rehabilitation. During March 14th, 2016 regular council meeting, Integrated Airport Systems was approved to act as a primary engineering consultant for the airport runway pavement rehabilitation project and submit our ACAP, Airport Capital Assistance Program, known as ACAP, grant application on behalf of the City of Lloydminster. This project will increase the safety by repairing our transverse cracks in the runway, as well as resurfacing the runway, taxiway, and the main apron. In 2017, some engineering work had been completed to prepare for the application for the runway rehabilitation project for the summer of 2018. The original grant application was not approved, but the city resubmitted in 2019 and was approved for the project funding. The airport administration is currently working with Integrated Airport Solutions Limited to complete the request for proposal for this project, and will begin forwarding an item to the future council meeting for the project contract awarding. The administration does not anticipate any impact to our scheduled flights, as the project will be completed in the evenings. The objective is to provide the committee with an update on the Lloydminster Airport rehab project. Budgeting. The City of Lloydminster has been approved for the ACAP funding, which will cover 100% of the project cost at completion. The environmental. Milling will take place on parts of the runway surface, as well as sweeping off the loose materials. Recycling these materials along the runway at the ends of 08 and then runway 26. This will lessen the environmental footprint and keep the millings out of our landfill. That is it.
Thank you, Wade. Questions, comments? Councilor Baker.
And thank you, Richard. First of all, it's nice that finally we were recognized and the federal government is stepping forward. ACAP, or whatever you call these, are here to help us because that's an awful big. And everybody uses the airport. So that's really good for you guys. I just had one question. It said in the report, we're going to be working on the RFP and we're bringing it forward in the future. Now, I'm just wondering about timing. Like, what are you anticipating when you say the future? Like 1 month or 3 months? Or the only reason I ask, because I wouldn't want to see it messing around in October out there.
Yeah. We only have so much time. We have to have the money spent.
I'm sorry?
We only have so much time to have the ACAP money spent. So right now, because it was quite a bit later than normal for the minister to announce.
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate that.
Because election year. So we're running into really tight scheduling. We're still reviewing the RFP, and we don't know if we're going to have it out for 2 weeks or 3 weeks for the RFP, depending on how many we have for projects come in or
But
bids.
you're still anticipating getting it this year?
It has to be done this year.
Okay. I've seen some of these
Yeah.
grants come in and we couldn't end up doing it till the next year. That's why I asked. Because people will be asking when they hear about it.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I know, Ray, I appreciate seeing that the traverse cracks will be filled because anyone that has experienced WestJet, as you run down the runway landing or going off, you feel those little bumps, and those are some lines that are cracked in the existing asphalt. Knowing that they're going to get fixed first, and a new resurfacing on top will ensure that our runway will be smooth and hopefully make 18 more years. We don't have to push it the next time we go back to ACAP funding. But appreciate that very much. And certainly, I think seeing the millings used at the airfield it enhances our airstrip from the north, I guess the northwest and the southeast, and just adds to the value there as well. So hats off to you, and look forward to this coming back to council as soon as possible to get that contract awarded so that we know that we're not laying asphalt any later than hopefully 15th of September, fingers crossed, and to go with Mother Nature. And if not, we'll blame engineering and James Rogers because I think he indicated earlier that he was going to try and get us good weather this year. So, any other questions or comments? It's always nice to write on engineering right away. You don't have to blame them if things go bad. So. Especially when they're not here.
Yeah.
Especially when they're not here. Poor dog's looking under. It's giving the evil eyes. All right. Very good. Good. Thank you very much, Wade. All right. Okay. Moving on to the agenda, 5.1.
Thank you, Your Worship, to present 5.1 land use bylaw amendment for portable signs and parking stalls. I'll ask Natasha Gow to come forward for the language.
Thank you, Your Worship. Council.
Good afternoon, Natasha.
Planning Administration is proposing the following changes to Land Use Bylaw 5/2016 in order to streamline the application process and to continue to allow the city to be development friendly. The first amendment pertains to portable signs. As we all know, the purpose of portable signs is to kind of offer a flexible means of advertising for special events and whatnot. Recently, our local newspaper has had some changes with their publishing time. They've reduced their publishing time from twice a week to once a week. This results in additional delay in us processing these applications. In order to maintain compliance with legislation, processing times are currently 6 to 8 weeks on portable signs. They currently sit under discretionary use. We're proposing in a few specified districts to move them to permitted use. If we move them to permitted use, the processing time will be 3 to 4 weeks. Because of the purpose of portable signs and the time frame required for a decision to be made, it is in the opinion of administration that moving portable signs from a discretionary use to permitted use would provide applicants and administration a more streamlined process. No other changes are proposed to this section at this time. The second amendment is in regards to parking stall size. Where lots are shrinking to promote smart growth, it is in the opinion of administration to provide potential applicants more opportunity to develop within the municipality by providing them the means to vary the length of parking spaces. In our 2016 land use bylaw change, parking stalls were increased from 5.5 to 6.4 meters. After some research with comparable municipalities, our parking stall length is still one of the largest we found. On average, they sit about 5.5 to 6 meters in length. Currently, within our powers of the bylaw, aside from parallel parking stalls, we have the ability to vary up to 15% of the required parking spaces by length, as long as that length is greater than 4.6 meters. We are here to ask that on large-scale developments, this amendment is targeted to large-scale developments, but any applicant can apply for it, as long as they provide sufficient justification to planning and engineering to ensure that no negative effects will occur with the overall development, that the development officer will be able to reduce the parking stall length of 100% of the required stalls. No other requirements within this section are proposed to be changed, and they will be required to comply with the remainder of the provisions of the bylaw.
Thank you. Questions, comments? So I'll maybe go ahead and speak.
Well, thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Ken. You know, I think what we're doing here, it doesn't have to come to City Council. But I just have a couple of questions. because I've been asked this question over and over and over. How are we going to control where the people are putting the signs? There's two issues that I've constantly been hearing over a number of years. Is one, the signs are not on the owner's property, they're out on the boulevard. And as late as a week ago, I had a grandson tell me that it's illegal to go through the stop sign so you can see past those signs. Because he did it when he was getting his driver's license, and the policeman told him he had to stop at the sign and proceed with caution to look around that sign. Is that true or not? That's what I was told. But that doesn't make sense to me. Those signs should be back from those stop signs so you can see, especially on these busy roads. So how are we going to control that? That's just a question. The other thing is, the administration has complained about the portable signs being out in the ditches, and they're trying to cut grass with the mowers, and they have to get off and they have to take out and cut the grass around the lakes. How are we going to deal with that if you don't have something to control it? Or is the complaining just going to go on? And I could take you and show you signs now that are blocking stop signs, and I'm sure you've all seen them. And you're not supposed to obstruct them. In fact, we you may have, a bylaw where you have big signage on the corner, if you're at a corner lot, you have to have it high enough so you can see underneath. And we have some signs on Highway 16 that are built right to the ground and you can't see around them. So how do we control this stuff so people can see? Thank you.
Here's a good question.
So planning and development in general is not blind to the
Come on,
issues.
speak to that mic.
Sorry.
Fifth year.
Planning and development at this time is not blind to the issues we're having with portable signs. Our biggest issue right now is people not applying for signs because it is a discretionary use. They're saying it's taking too long. So a lot of the signs we see up in town like right now are not permitted. So through the permit process, we will be able to regulate the exact location, because then we can make sure they do not interfere with the sight lines of intersections and whatnot. And we're hoping that by encouraging people to go back through the permitting process, we can correct a lot of those issues. The second issue comes down to enforcement and manpower. And unfortunately, that's one of the biggest things we're struggling with as a department.
It just be obstruction on it. Doesn't make any sense to me.
The major ones, when it is brought to our attention, we do have some other crews in the city that do help us out. We do our best to contact the owner of the sign and have the sign removed, because the ones that are a visual obstruction to traffic are a priority item to us.
Councilor Forrest.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I have a comment and a handful of questions. So this to me, the situation you're describing with the signs is kind of a classic case of overly burdensome regulations causing people to go around the regulations in general. So because it's too much of a pain to actually go through the permitting process, it's just not worth your time to go through the permitting process, and then you end up with a scenario where you have people putting signs that are unpermitted or putting them in the wrong spot altogether, and making your job incredibly difficult, as well as bylaws more complicated and everything. So from that perspective, I totally understand changing this from discretionary use to permitted use, so that planning has the ability to make a decision on it within a reasonable time frame, and someone actually goes through the rigmarole of getting the proper permit in place, and you can make sure that the sign is put in place that isn't in violation of any kind of Transport Canada issues. My only question is, though, within that, are the fees associated with doing it significantly high that you'll end up having, or maybe too high that you'll continue to have the same problem? So on one hand, as a city councillor, I want to make sure that there's somewhat of a user fee for people who are going through the planning, or making our planning process and making our planners do some work for them so that they can have this. At the same time, the fee, the amount matters, because that can be another barrier that someone's just going to choose to try and go around if the fees are too high.
Thank you, Councillor Thorson. I didn't bring the numbers in front of me, but by moving it from a discretionary use to a permitted use, our advertising in the paper is also decreased, so our fees are being reduced for the applicant from moving it from a discretionary to permitted. That was one of the other things we heard, because with the discretionary use, they also had to pay advertising, and it was a significant cost, so people were avoiding it for that reason. Now with lowering the application fee, we're we're hoping that encourages them as well.
Okay, so if I get that straight, we're gonna make it less expensive and take less time, and we're gonna have greater control over where the signs are going.
We're hoping the third one, yes.
Sounds like an okay idea to me.
Councilor Natchez.
Thanks, Your Worship. I was just thinking about the length of the parking stall, and I know that, so I was Googling the length of trucks. So GM is 6.58 meters, Ford is 6.31, Toyota is 6.29, and yet every one of the measurements we have is significantly shorter than that. And yet I think within our communities, you tend to see more pickup trucks than cars. So I know when parking in some of the larger areas, you see trucks will actually use 2 stalls, so they use the one, part of the one on the opposite side and want to stay out of the way. Is in the end, probably what we're seeing is businesses are actually losing part of the number of stalls available to them. We are seeing more people come in with more economy-sized vehicles and whatnot. So, is that a concern at all? I don't know. I guess because we went from 5.5 to 6.4, and we're close, I guess, in terms of length overall.
Sorry, can you repeat your question?
Well,
You
our
lost your train of
size
thought.
of our parking stalls are actually shorter than trucks.
Yes.
And so that you're having trucks now that can be extended out. So
Yes.
there's a bit of a safety concern if you have someone walking behind a truck or a little kid or whatever and runs up, you can't see them. And so the other piece is that many of the vehicles or trucks that will have the extra hitch on the back are actually using 2 stalls when you go into the mall.
Yes.
Next door here, you can see they're doing that. So where does it all fit in here, I guess? Because I don't have a problem with reducing it, but I guess in the end, I do know it's expensive to put parking stalls in, and it costs a lot of money to do that. I guess in some areas, though, I guess if you are in a smaller business where we have concerns about congestion in some of those areas, are we actually creating more of a hazard by shortening the stalls, particularly where it's really congested?
We have done some looking into this. Parking lots, unlike public roadways, they do not have a guideline that facilitate perfect numbers. It comes down to the municipality. So the only thing we can do is follow best practices. With this amendment being targeted to larger scale development, we are also putting the onus on them to making sure that even though they're decreasing the width, they still have the drive aisle length, and sometimes it's not uncommon to see the drive aisle length being used as that little bit of a hangout area too. So as long as they can have their transportation engineers provide us justification that this will not be a negative impact on the overall development, that then we'll proceed with that.
Yeah, I just see the lengths, and I know that we're a truck community.
And we know we targeted, when we did our research as administration, we targeted Cold Lake, Grand Prairie, Fort McMurray, a lot of those other large municipalities that are targeted as oil communities with vehicles similar in nature as ours. And we were still, once again, at 6.4, the highest. The highest we could find in an approved bylaw was 6 meters.
Councilor Torres.
Thank you, Your Worship. So as far as the parking stalls go, to me, like the issue confuses me a little bit because I don't know how much if we're saying the length of the line really matters versus the width of the overall parking lot. Because for me, it's with the big trucks is the turning radius and things like that for a potentially smaller space. So I'm wondering, is there any change to regulations in terms of the width of distance between, like if you're at the mall, between the one that's right on my left and then the one that's on my right here that's just on the other side, and our backs are facing each other? Is there still regulations that we have to follow in terms of the distance between those two that doesn't change if we're just talking about the change in the line length?
So this amendment here pertains to the painted line and the length of the painted line. The drive aisles within the parking lot are not proposed to be changed at this time.
So yeah, I think that's the important part for me. Like the length of line, I don't know if it's that big of a deal because the majority of trucks will say are going to be longer than it anyways. So we're only talking about an extra meter of whether or not the line's there, but so long as you've got the right width between, back-to-back parking spots that you would have the turning radius. But to me, it makes sense that planning and development would have the ability to make that judgment call based on the development, seeing as you guys are kind of the experts in this area.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Torreson. And like I said here, in order to be approved for this amendment, we're putting the onus on the developer to do the groundwork to ensure that no negative effects are going to occur.
Yeah, so to be clear, right, you're asking them to prove to you that it would be fine and a benefit to them, and that there would be no concern coming out of it, but the onus is on them to prove to you that they should have a variance from the normal standard.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor, oh, sorry. Councillor.
Well, I hope I'm not confused. The width isn't going to change, is it?
No, the width, no,
No.
just the width of the
Well,
sign.
no, because right now, the half tons right now, you're banging doors with
Yes.
the guy next door, so if you make it smaller, I don't know where you're gonna park your trucks, so the other guy's gonna get a lot of damage in it. The length, I understand, but not the width.
Yeah.
We're only proposing to amend.
Well, yeah, that's what I thought when I
Okay.
read it.
And this isn't even a general amendment, still general parking requirements in the city will be at the 6.4 meters length. Only if they apply for us to use this power will this come into play.
No, that's fine, I just,
Okay, good.
I'm good.
So, Tasha, I just wanted to ask you, alluded to in your comment, I think you've spoken to businesses because this is a gray area for me. I know I see the signs, and then most of the council all see the signs that we've indicated. So has the business community been, have we had some consultation from administration to the business community so that they know what you're thinking and proposing?
In regards to portable signs?
Portable
or-
signs, yeah, sorry.
We have started the discussion with them. The other issue we're facing with the business community, Your Honor, is that they are having signs placed on their property without their knowledge.
Okay.
So then through that application process, one of the steps required is owner authorization. So the applicant, it could just be a sign company or whoever, has to go to the landowner and sign an owner authorization so that all parties are aware of the development on their property,
Which they don't have to today.
because they're not applying for permits.
Right, okay. So, and I guess it does get a little confusing if I was to lease a piece of property and be a leasee from the owner. I would have to go to the property owner even though I have a lease that allows me to use the parking lot.
A lot of leases, we read some, leasees provide us their lease agreement and it says they have the ability to permit certain types of development, so it's not always required, but on occasion, we have to go to the
Go
landowner.
to the owner, but
Yeah.
yeah, it depends. So the essence would be on, it would be on the leasee. If they figure they're going to need more signage, they'll need to negotiate that into their lease. Okay. Okay. Have we had any response from the sign company or companies, but I think there's more than one?
We're right now just in the public consultation component of this. We've had informal discussion. So by the time we come back to council, we'll have a summary of what we've heard from them.
Okay, terrific.
Yeah, just to be clear, Your Worship, right now, landowner authorization is required if applying for a sign permit. Where we're struggling is there's a large amount of signs out there that aren't permitted by our department.
And I think that will hopefully alleviate some of the concerns we've heard from council members about location of signs and our teams involved. Hopefully, and at the end of the day, I appreciate the answer you gave Councilor Thorson that it's going to cost less and hopefully would be more efficient, more efficient. So at the end of the day, the customer that we service as a city will have a better experience in getting this whole process through. Hopefully they'll understand that there are certain parameters that have to be worked around, and public safety is very much a parameter around this council table in the city. I think people want to be sure that they're safe, and they don't want to step out behind a sign and get run over, or at an intersection cause a vehicle accident, because the sign, people with the signs today are currently liable if it gets down to push to come and shove. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Well, thank you, Natasha. Look forward to public consultation, hearing back from the process. And moving on to the agenda. Yes, would you mind grabbing Councillor Thorson? No. When I get you up, Natasha, so we'll just hang on. Councillor, go from there. All right, moving on to 5.2, City Manager, on to Natasha.
Thank you, Your Worship. Planning and Development has received 5 applications pertaining to the area of Lakeside, as well as the first phase of development. The applications we've received include an area structure plan, a municipal development plan amendment, a land use bylaw amendment, subdivision approval, and a text amendment to the land use bylaw. Just to give you a brief summary, the purpose of the area structure plan is to propose a vision for the neighborhood, sequence of development, serviceability, and as well as compliance with our city's municipal development plan policies. The area structure plan alludes to the entire 2 quarters of Lakeside, but its focus is on the west quarter, which has been identified in the document as the plan area. The second application of the municipal development plan amendment is a specific amendment to the plan area, so the west quarter section, which will just bring general land uses in line with the municipal development plan. The third amendment is a land use bylaw amendment, which goes hand in hand with the subdivision application for what they've identified as the first phase of development. And the last application is a text amendment to the land use bylaw. They've applied to add warehouse sales and automotive and minor recreational vehicle sales and rentals as discretionary use in the commercial shopping center C4 district, as well as they've applied to amend section 7.4.3 development regulations to also align with C5. So the amendment to the development regulations and the uses proposed to conform them with the development regulations in the C5 service district. Currently, there are no lands in the city zoned as C4. In order for development of this area to continue to occur, City Council must first approve an area structure plan. Both the Government of Alberta and our municipal development plan says that no land can be considered for subdivision and development until an area structure plan is approved. Then subsequent approvals must happen in concurrent order, and once all the approvals have been obtained, the landowner can then proceed with development permit and construction. Lastly, jointly, planning and development with Musgrave Development is hosting an open house pertaining to the area structure plan on Wednesday, May 15th from 4:30 to 7:30 at Best Western Plus Meridian Hotel. These applications will be open for comment to the public until Wednesday, May 22nd, which ends our legislative referral period, at which time Planning and Administration will receive the feedback and bring forward a recommendation to Council.
Thank you, Natasha. Questions or comments? So I'm completely clear, I think people are. If we move to page 290, if we could go on this package on the screen. Page 2, second page. Right there, thank you. The, I guess, purple area, as I refer to it as, is the area in question. That's at the corner of 75th and 12th, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Additionally, that quarter has, I guess I call it a power substation. Is that proper terminology?
An electric substation, yes.
Okay. So I was clear on the location. Councilor Baker?
Thank you, Worship. On figure 4, what is that? Like, this is an area structure plan, which normally entails the quarter section. But there's a couple of, are they doing the west half of that quarter? Is that being surveyed and subdivided right now?
So in order for this is a subdivision application. In order for us to be approving this subdivision, we first need to approve the area structure plan. Concurrently with the area structure plan, the developer has brought forward the first phase of development. It's also not uncommon for the first phase to, in essence, be staged. So this is the subdivision for the first phase, but he's only applied for the land use amendment of the first stage of the first phase. Or sorry, he has applied for the land use amendment for the entire first phase of development. Does that make sense?
Where's your pointer?
Where's my pointer? Oh, you would.
We'd have to go with the handoff on the screen.
Well, everything to north of the utility right away, or utility lot?
Yeah.
Okay, draw a line around the one you're talking about.
So the first phase of development is this entire
That's that whole
subdivision
thing.
boundary.
That's what I wanted to know. I was wondering, was the lot just north of the...
Nope.
Because what I was concerned about is, that road is important, that east-west road. And that isn't gonna change, right?
So this one, sorry, that we have up here is identified as 20th.
Yeah, that isn't gonna change, is it?
That road doesn't exist today.
No, I know. Horses are grazing up.
Yes.
When we develop that, in phase one, is that road going where it's showing?
Yes, so that is the purpose of us approving an area structure plan, because we will approve a general road
Is
network.
that part of the area structure plan?
Yes.
Okay.
So if
And
you
so-
can go back, sorry, to figure 1, Wendy.
I guess if it's gonna be some kind of a mall, it'll be busy, and certainly you have it right at Superstore and other places just like that. But the west half of that corridor, for argument's sake, is all part of this development that we're talking about today.
The first phase, yes.
So the remainder of figure 4 was that conceptual drawing of what the developer believes it will look like when we look at figure 4.
Yes, so figure 1, which is here, which will be eventually a part of an area structure plan bylaw approved by council. Once council approves an area structure plan, all development must comply with this map until they come back to council for approval. So road networking, general land use concept as well. Speaking in regards to traffic, the developer also completes studies. One of the studies he is working on and we're reviewing right now with our engineering department is a traffic impact analysis to determine what happens to 75th and what happens to 12th come the first phase of development.
Your worship.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah, just to help, I think I understand what Councilor Baker is asking. That whole quarter section is part of the area structure plan that council will approve. Construction will be on phase 1 only at this time.
Yeah.
And phase 1 is the most western portion, the area identified in red on the map.
The west half.
The west half.
What do you got? Okay. And that's exactly what I asked. But I'm wondering about that road.
Yeah, the road.
That will be there.
The road will be there and it's
Okay.
required as part of the construction.
Because I realize how area structure plans work, they change.
Mhm.
But people are gonna be asking, because there's a lot of housing just to the east there. And people will be asking what's gonna happen there.
Yeah,
That's important to know that.
the east-west road, I don't know 100% at this time whether it will be connected in the first phase.
It will not be connected.
No, that doesn't matter now to me.
Yeah,
It's just where is it gonna be there?
yeah.
Because
So
that's
if,
what they'll ask.
if it changes between the initial phase, the red portion, and where it connects to on the existing phase to the east, the existing lakeside development, if there's any change in alignment there, which I don't foresee there would be, that would need an amendment to the area structure plan, which would need council approval for that.
Just
the
how to
intent
answer the
is-
questions.
Yeah, the intent is that road would be set for the future of that development.
I've had a couple of questions already, and the ad was in the newspaper. And that's why I'm asking, so that I make sure I'm right here.
Well, and I
But thank
think,
you, that's good.
I think the developer and the applicant would be the best person to ask. That's why there's that public opportunity to understand as well.
But I think we've got to start here with our team.
Absolutely, because as the application comes, it's straightforward. Of course,
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to ensure I am on the same page, so we're asking to do the area structure plan, and then the only subdivision that's happening at this stage are the commercial lots, because within that picture, the figure 4 one that he was mentioning, it still says like kind of the land location for the remainder of it, for all the residential portion. That's not being subdivided at this time in the application,
No.
correct?
Sorry, that just overlays, and that can be something we can even have their land surveyor change. That's his conceptual drawing. Nothing outside this bold line is being approved.
So, to make sure I'm on the same page then, on the area structure plan, we really care about the colors of where commercial and residential goes. So this area, the conceptual drawing, that could change completely and be totally different when it comes time to actually subdivide that area. It's not necessarily going to have to be in that same network of roads.
The cul-de-sacs and whatnot can change.
Okay, that's what I thought. And then they would have to make a separate amendment to the area structure plan if they decided that, let's say, well, that's not enough commercial in that particular area, we need to change some of those potential residential of the current area structure plan, we want to change that to commercial or institutional or whatever the case is, they have the ability to do that through a separate application after the area structure plan is approved.
Correct, and you'll see even on their area structure plan, they have 2 areas identified, sorry Wendy, on figure 1. So they have 2 areas identified here, this area here, and this area to the south. The area to the south is potential medium density or residential and institutional. So at some point in time, they are going to have to come and decide, are they going to the institutional route, which would either be a church or a school, something along that lines, or are they going to be residential?
Okay, and that actually brought up a different question for me. So when you do an area structure plan this way where there are multiple potential uses within an area, they don't have to choose right now, like at the area structure plan stage?
There's probably a perfect answer to that. The reason why we've left this as potential is because the developer is still engaging with some potential institutional uses that may want that land. And from a planning perspective, it's always easier to advise the public that there may be a church there or there may be a school there than to block the land as residential and have people say, we didn't know this.
Yeah, okay, that's fair, because you're probably more likely to have less people upset, frustrated if they believed if it was one of those 2 things rather than I believed it was residential and you changed it on me and hey, that's not fair. But if you're going to something that maybe has higher density or something that is institutional in nature, that's like a larger building facility that may obstruct their view, something along those lines, they'll be more likely to be okay with that than if you were to change it from residential to something else.
Correct, Councilor Torres. And it's easier to advise people that you're downgrading the land use next to them than you're increasing it. The other land I just want to speak to is this one here. This is potentially commercial and residential. That is there because in our municipal development plan, the city talks about a concept as an urban village. The developer has grasped that concept, and that's what's being proposed there. So that's supposed to be a mixed-use transition site of residential, small storefront commercial, and even a park space integrated into it as more of a hub of the neighborhood, transitioning from the commercial uses into the residential. He also has some images depicting that within his area structure plan.
Okay, awesome, thank you. So just 2 more questions. One is, as far as the area structure plan and all the other amendments that are being made, do you have to finish all 3 readings of a bylaw of an area structure plan before you can start on the other parts and pieces of that, or can they happen concurrently?
They can happen concurrently as long as the final reading of the area structure plan happens first. If anything happens to the area structure plan along the way and it doesn't even receive first reading, we can't proceed with any of the other applications.
And my last question is, when is this expected to come for first reading?
It's expected to come to first reading next council.
That's like the 22nd? Okay. Perfect.
Second?
Yeah, that's Tuesday.
Yeah.
Thank you.
27th.
27th.
27th, June 27th.
May.
Oh! May.
Due to the long weekend, I believe that's why our schedule's adjusted a little bit for the month of May, so May 27th.
Councilor Baker.
Well, Your Worship, I was asked about, I thought it was 12th Street, but it's not. 19th Street. When you make it bigger, it's 19th Street. That road that comes through and connects the curve and ends up at 75th. I had a fellow ask me, when he saw that map, about, is that where that main road's gonna be? Because he wants to buy a lot down there, but he doesn't want to be anywhere near this road. And I said, well, as far as I know, that's why I'm asking about that road. Because we've advertised that that's where the main road's going. It was in the newspaper.
Yep.
So someone goes ahead and buys the land, then we move the road, then the trouble starts all over again. So you can, I'm just making my point, why I'm asking if that is itched where that road's gonna go. When you look at the overall map, I don't know where else it could go, because I don't know how much of that's actually developed out in the west half of that other quarter. But in any case, that was the question a fellow who wanted to build a house asked me, and I said, well, I'm sure it will, but I'll find out.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. So once council approves this land use concept by bylaw, the only way it can be changed from this alignment is by council through bylaw, and the developer, just like he's providing us justification that this works, if he proposes to amend it, he needs to provide us new justification.
But we can't guarantee it to the guy who didn't want.
It's in the hands of council.
So I guess it's actually, and if I could say this, it's in the hands of the developer actually, because we can only approve what we see today. And,
Yeah, no, but
and for
we're looking
that-
ahead here.
Yeah.
I know it'll come back and bite us.
Well, I think that's the negotiation between the land purchaser and the land seller, because as we can appreciate, we can't come.
They're looking for city council to tell them. What are you guys approving? They know the system.
Well, and I appreciate that, and I think that they've got to realize that from the perspective that we can't, what decision we make today, another council could set slightly different directions. We know that's happened in the past. But Executive Manager.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. At the end of the day, 19th Street is a 24-meter right-of-way, and the only connection point to, I'll call the East Lakeside, would be on that 24-meter right-of-way. That's what we call interior collector, or collector road. Your local roads are 18 meters. That is the only collector that would connect to the 20th Street. The alignment may shift slightly, although I don't foresee it will, because in order for phase one to move forward, the developer will need to install services from East Lakeside to the west portion of the West Lakeside, and they will need to follow a road right away. So that alignment would be set fairly hard at this time.
That's good. Thanks, guys. Yeah.
Councilor Thorson.
Never mind. That's a good question.
Any other questions or comments for
Your
Natasha?
Worship, may I add one more thing? Area structure plans are a very onus process on the developer. There's a lot of work to be completed behind the signs in technical documents as well as the map that we all see in front of us. So just as onus as it is to bring forward an area structure plan, an amendment to the area structure plan is the exact same process, which generally, based on our standard, is a 6 to 12 month process. So unless something significant occurs, amendments don't often happen.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you for the information, Natasha. It's a process that we don't go through every day. We appreciate the late work that planning and engineering has done to get us to this point.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Moving on to the agenda of 5.3, now up to City Manager.
Thank you, Your Worship. To present 5.3, draft nonprofit operating grant policy, I'll ask the city clerk to vote on consent.
Thank you, Your Worship. The item we have before you is the draft nonprofit operating grant policy. And it's to provide council or the committee with a draft nonprofit operating grant policy for the review and direction. Historically, the City of Lloydminster has had several nonprofit organizations present to council on a yearly basis, requesting funding. Administration has established that a policy is required to create a framework for a accountable, transparent process to distribute monies and qualifying nonprofits. This draft policy ensures that all nonprofits are aware of the funding opportunity, as well as requests for funding are reviewed, evaluated, and distributed. That's a tough one for me today. Equitably. Excuse me for a second. A couple of points within the policy I'll just bring the council's attention. If you look at Section 6 of the funded organizations, administration has identified Vic Juba, the Lloydminster Library, the Lloydminster and District SPCA, and the Lloydminster Regional Archives as organizations that would approach the city and be included in the main operating budget of the city as part of this process. And we would work with them to bring their request forward to council as part of that budgeting process. The second portion of this is the operating grant for the other nonprofits, council would determine at what level or funding they would set aside for those groups, and then those groups would make application as we've seen in the past. There is a reporting component to this item as a condition of funding. Nonprofits are required to provide to the CFO by June 1st an audited financial statement and a report outlining how the grant monies were spent in the interest of the community or in the betterment of the community. And if they fail to do that, they would be precluded from applying for the following years for grant funding.
Thank you, City Clerk. Councilor Thorson.
Thank you, Worship. A handful of questions on this one. One of them was just a comment of something maybe we should consider. I saw at some point a specific spot where requesting that audited financial statements be provided by each of these groups. My only comment is when we run into scenarios with very small non-for-profits, they don't necessarily require an audit normally. And I think some subjectivity to that should be good. So maybe have reviewed statements as an option instead, and there's some subjectivity to either the CFO or something along those lines, because the difference between an audit and a review is about $5,000. And when you're on a low operating budget, that's pretty huge. So it's something to consider that a reviewed financial statement is just as good as an audited, depending on the size of the organization.
Absolutely, we could add it as accepted by the CFO.
Okay. One of the other things I was going to say is, as far as the operating grants for the individual groups, first things first, the Lloydminster Library should probably be the Lloydminster Public Library, as that's their proper name. But other than that, are we going to still have the same process as far as the transparent process? And I'm not necessarily saying them coming here and presenting their budget. However, you know, in the past, going through operating plans and at least having some experience in that, is that still going to be coming to council in any way that was similar to the past, is the expectation?
There's no expectation of how that would work, so if that was council's wishes, we can certainly accommodate that.
Okay, yeah, because for me, I think you don't necessarily have a lot of opportunity to have that, we'll say, council oversight in a public setting that happens, and I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. I know it's not incredibly probably fun for everyone involved, but I think it is a good opportunity to ensure that that transparent process from City Council and how we're expending funds to these groups still exists, and that there's some oversight going on with how we spend public dollars. So if it's just buried within the city budget, I don't know that that necessarily provides the same kind of transparency that we've had in the past. And then last,
I can answer that just quickly. The intention was, in terms of the process, not to change a whole bunch. We talked about some different timelines, but given that some of it, if you look at our existing ones outside of the four that are mentioned in here, there's some pretty significant dollars there that administration would not be comfortable approving without council input. So we would anticipate some kind of, whether it's presentation or presentation to council, whether application-wise or in person as we've done in the past, would continue.
Okay. And lastly, just in terms of the timing of these things, because we have September 15th. Now, my only concern is, and I know the city wants them as soon as possible, but many boards and things like that take the summer off, and their first meeting into what we'll call the new year after the summer's off is likely in September. And depending on when you have it in September is whether or not you've got your budget approved or has your budget even been presented. So you could run into some issues with the September 15th date, so I wonder if you wouldn't push that back a little bit. I can speak from experience at the library board. Generally, it's the last Thursday of the month, and September, or third now, but it's still the third Thursday of the month, and it's generally approved in the September meeting, so you likely wouldn't meet that deadline from the library's perspective. So we need to communicate with them if that expectation is being set to make sure that that's something that can even be achieved. Otherwise, we have to move the target on when we expect them to come to us.
Could make it October 15th.
No, that might be too late.
I think one of the reasons we're bringing it forward now is we start communicating with the groups in the reasonably near future. No different than we're doing with our own internal departments, that we're starting our budget process earlier just because of the demands of dates to present to council, get approvals to council, and so forth. So I think if approved, if this was approved, we would get the word out right away and on the deadlines, and they can start working prior to the summer months, because we recognize, we run into that ourselves as a city, is we have a number of staff that take, you know, get vacation and stuff like that, and lots of taking in the summer, so we're trying to move our budget process ahead as well, so we're trying to place some of the onus as well on the user groups, and we understand, you know, if we're talking another 15 days or something, that probably would be the end of the world, but if we're looking at October, November, that's putting a little bit more pressure on terms of what we're presenting to council.
Thank you. I was just going to say that, yeah, just the end of September would probably be a little bit closer to what's realistic for their ability to do for most of these groups. Thank you.
Questions or comments? Any others to add? I think the list that administration's brought forward is a good start. The city has obligations to Vic Judah, and this goes back from the beginning of time, the creation of Vic Judah. The library is a responsibility of the municipality. The SPCA in our city plays a dual role, both as a contract provider as well as a grant recipient for operations, and certainly the regional archives play a very serious role in the operations of the city and the keeper of the long-term knowledge of the city in many cases. I think that the four that are identified but has not precluded anyone else. I think that message also needs to go out is there's now a policy if you're looking for support from the city that will be conveyed to all groups that have reached out to the city in the past, and I'm sure will continue to reach out to the city. I think that's very important that we have some direction, because this is always a challenging area for us every budget year, and ensuring that we get some protocol, and this way it's direction is set. Financial reports are important, because at the end of the day, taxpayer money needs to be accounted for, and I appreciate the requirement the administration built in looking for those financial statements, and as well as a report to the general benefit of the community, because without that, we know the money is spent, but what did it get spent on? So I think that we have some members of this council on various committees that are mentioned there, but in the same token, it's always good to have that report come back. Any other questions or comments? Thank you.
Thank you for your action.
This will move to the inquiries from the media.
Thank you, Your Worship. You would like to speak with yourself and hours and council document.
I'll look for a motion to go to recess. Councilor Diachuk, seconder. Councilor Monroe. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Good today. I missed that September 12th.